Zack Snyder's Justice League is now streaming on HBO Max, and I would like to share my thoughts about the movie. I will do my best to not delve too deeply into spoilers, but there will be some, slight spoilers I'd like to talk about. You could probably get away with watching this video before you watch the movie, but as always, I would recommend that you actually watch the movie first before watching this video. And before I start talking about my thoughts, there may be some of you watching that maybe don't know the entire production history of this movie, which the whole production history which caused this movie to come out. So I'm just going to give a real brief rundown of what is known that happened during the production of the film, which led to this movie coming out. So basically, when Zack Snyder was filming the Justice League, he filmed the whole thing. He filmed about 4 hours worth of movie. Now, he didn't necessarily do the post-production on all of it, such as special effects, and music and all that stuff. And apparently what happened was he showed about a 2.5 hour cut of the movie to Warner Brothers executives, and they were not pleased with it. And now the next three things that happened, I don't know the exact timeline of events, but all three of these next things happened at some point that contributed to, the movie that we got to see over the weekend. So Warner Brothers issued a mandate that said the film had to be 2 hours or less. It could not be more than 2 hours. They wanted to get it shown in as many theaters as possible to make as much money as possible. Another thing that happened, which was quite tragic, Zack Snyder's daughter committed suicide, which caused him to leave the project before he could finish post-production. And the third thing that happened was Warner Brothers brought in a new director, Joss Whedon, who also directed The Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron. They brought him in to finish making the movie, and he basically did a bunch of reshoots. It's been widely reported more or less that the theatrical version of Justice League that came out in 2017 featured only about 30 minutes of what Zack Snyder actually shot, and the rest were reshoots that Joss Whedon made. Now, there's really been no way to confirm that because apparently, I'm using the word apparently and reportedly a lot, apparently Zack Snyder never saw the theatrical version. Some people close to him watched it, and they told him not to watch it because he would not like it. Following about, a 2-year online campaign from fans of Zack Snyder, from the actors of Justice League themselves, and Zack Snyder, Warner Brothers were like, all right, we'll give you the money and the budget to finish post-production on the movie that you filmed, and we'll even let you, film any more scenes you need to, and we'll put it on HBO Max. And that's what led to the movie that we got over the weekend as I'm recording this. I'm going to talk about the things that I didn't necessarily like in this movie for two reasons. Because first of all, there aren't that many. And also because I like to end my videos on a positive by talking about the positive things. There were some scenes in this movie that stood out to me, like as awkward, and there were some lines that I can't put my finger on it exactly what it was, but there were just some scenes that didn't seem to like flow with the rest of the movie. They just kind of stood out as maybe being like, I don't know, a little bit awkward, like a bit of a cheesy line. Maybe there was a humorous line or just like an awkward scene or an awkward line. Again, there were a lot of them that I couldn't put my finger on, so, I can't, say why I didn't like it. There were just some scenes that I didn't like. The movie is 4 hours long. For me, I'm going to say for me it's a positive, but I think most people will find that as a negative. A lot of people maybe don't have the attention span or time to sit through a 4-hour film. I will say it is broken up nice and neat into 6 chapters plus an epilogue, so there's convenient spots to take bathroom breaks, to pause it if you need to come back either later in the day or just on a separate day. There isn't a lot for Lois Lane to do in this movie. Amy Adams as Lois Lane is basically just there to mourn for Superman's death. She really only has one thing to do, but for the most part she's kind of underutilized, which may be because of something I'm about to talk about in a minute here, but I just felt that with an actress as good as Amy Adams, I felt they could have used her a little bit more. If you watched any of the trailers for this movie, then this next negative really stood out. The trailers went a long way to promote a specific villain that was only very briefly hinted at in the theatrical version, and the marketing went out of its way to be like, this villain's going to be in the movie. And that villain was in the movie, but not as much or in the role that we kind of anticipated from the marketing. So I think a lot of people will maybe be a little bit let down that the advertising, built up this character as they're going to be in it, but not as much as we thought they were. Which I think connects to my last negative. There are some scenes in this movie that are specifically set up for future Justice League movies or movies in this universe. Now, that could turn into a positive at some point, potentially. Who's to say if this movie doesn't get great reception, makes HBO and Warner Brothers a lot of money, which from what I've seen, I probably will. Who's to say that Zack Snyder won't change his mind and come back and finish up the story that he was going for, and then these things could turn into a positive. But there are definitely some scenes in here that are hinting at stuff that's to come in the future that don't really add much to this movie. So I liked the scenes. They just at this point we know that they're going to lead to nothing. Again, that could change, but just because right now those scenes are kind of like a tease for something that's never going to come, they're going to be a negative for me. The things that I like in this movie are abundant. This movie is infinitely better than the theatrical version. There is so much more context in this movie that got cut from the theatrical version. In that version of the movie that came out in theaters a couple years ago, the parademons just kind of started showing up. We don't know why. We think maybe it had something to do with Batman's, apocalyptic visions that he had in Batman vs. Superman, but they never explain why the parademons start showing up and why Steppenwolf comes and tries to get the mother boxes. The opening scene in Zack Snyder's Justice League is the death of Superman from Batman vs. Superman, and we see that he's screaming in agony that's letting out a huge shockwave. And it's that shockwave that, kind of alerts the mother boxes to be like, hey, this planet just lost its main line of defense. It's ripe for the taking. And so that's why Steppenwolf comes to the planet. That's why the parademons start showing up, because they realize Superman is gone. We can take this planet easily, or so they think. Another thing about this film that I thought was better was the CGI. Just overall, I thought the effects were better. I thought visually it was more cohesive and felt more like Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman than the theatrical version did. Speaking of CGI, there are two characters I guess I'd like to talk about that I think justice, no pun intended, justice was served to these two characters. The first one was Steppenwolf. Oh my god. In the first movie, the theatrical version, he looked like garbage. Like, he did not look like a movie character. I could barely... he wasn't even a character at all. He was just this CGI mess that didn't have emotion. He had no, motivation. So not only does Steppenwolf look a lot better, he also has more depth, and he feels like a character. Like, there's one scene where he's talking to one of Darkseid's little, sidemen or whatever, like a henchman or whatever you want to call him. And the henchman is like, you still owe Darkseid 50,000 planets. And you see Steppenwolf's reaction, you feel empathy for him because you see how sad and just defeated he looks. We get more context to why he's on Earth, why he's trying to get the mother boxes. They just totally rounded out his character. Is he on the level of a Thanos? No, Thanos looks better, is more complex as a character, but this Steppenwolf compared to theatrical Steppenwolf, a million times better. The other character that justice was served to was Cyborg. They pretty much cut out his whole story in the theatrical version of Justice League. I think it's fair to say that this movie is half Justice League movie and half Cyborg origin story, because we get everything. We get his backstory. We get to learn more about him just as a character, him trying to come to terms with his new abilities, his tension with his father, who he kind of blames for some of their past trauma. We just get so much more of that, whereas in the theatrical version, he wasn't even a character, so kind of the same with Steppenwolf. Cyborg was basically there to use his robotic, hacking skills to track the mother box, and then that was it. He doesn't have too many lines of good dialogue. He doesn't have any emotional depth or backstory. And this movie, you could really tell that it's a shame. It was a shame that got cut out from the theatrical version. So I'm glad that we got to see a lot more of Cyborg. The Justice League in this movie felt like more of a team than they did in the theatrical version. Every character has motivation for being there, motivation that has been fleshed out throughout the movie, so you don't have like just one character showing up and be like, all right, I'm in. We see what has motivated them to want to join the Justice League. The way that they work together, both as a team and then just kind of like little teams, is we just get more of that. Like the dynamic between Barry Allen and Cyborg, Victor Stone is just like they have a really good kind of back and forth the whole time. Barry Allen is kind of like funny and socially awkward, and Victor Stone is more like kind of dark and brooding, and they have a really funny like relationship that way. And it's just better to see like they felt more like a team than they did in the theatrical version, both as a fighting team but also just as like people trying to deal with their emotions together. They just felt more united in this movie. Another thing that I really liked about this movie that I don't think was at all in the theatrical version, we get to hear a lot more of little hints of the Man of Steel theme music. I absolutely love that theme, and that was totally absent from the theatrical version. And at certain points throughout this movie, we get to hear parts of it, and it just brings up like a swell of positive emotions. So I really appreciated that. I want to end my review of this movie with this. I spent a lot of time before the theatrical version came out and before this movie came out thinking about how DC had done it wrong, at least in compared to Marvel. So with the Marvel movies, we have all of these different individual groups and storylines and individuals that we get to experience each of them individually on their own. And then here, I have like a very crude diagram for this. So basically, with the Marvel movies, you get all of the individual storylines over here. And as time goes by, right, some might like interact and cross over with each other. And then at the very end, they all connect and we get Infinity War and Endgame. So we get to spend more time learning about the characters on their own. And then when we get here, we're more rewarded for having been invested in all of this. And, Marvel was the first to do that. And obviously there's going to be comparisons between Marvel superheroes and the movies and the DC superheroes and movies. And DC wasn't doing it that way. And I had always thought like, Aquaman, Cyborg, Flash, all should have gotten a movie on their own first before the Justice League. So that way we know a little bit about the characters, and when the Justice League movie happens, we kind of have context for them, and more stuff makes sense. However, based on what I know now about what Zack Snyder's original plan was for the Justice League, which some of you all might not know, there were supposed to be 3 Justice League movies. There was going to be this one, a second one, and then a third one. And so it's possible that instead of having the character development happen, prior to the team up of all the superheroes, the plan was to have the focus of the 3 movies be on those characters, but also have their development happen in the Justice League movies. Which, when you think about it, so I have another crude diagram. This is what it would have looked like. So, it's one story, right? It's up on this top one we have Batman and Superman. And then this bottom one is Wonder Woman because she was kind of on her own, right? But it's just one story from Justice League. And, this is where all of the growth happens. We get to follow all of the characters along one story. So maybe in the second Justice League, we would have gotten more of like a Barry Allen backstory where he's trying to, free his dad from jail. That might still happen. I think that might be a separate movie later in the future, but who knows? So my point is There are movie franchises out there that have like 3 movies in the franchise where you get plenty of character development, and these trilogies or these series are beloved, beloved, whatever. And so maybe that would have happened with the Justice League movies. Maybe, there was a reason why they didn't do all of the origin movies first, because it's all one story. And think about it in another way. Another YouTuber who I was watching who did a review on this movie pointed something out which I had noticed, but I had never really thought to consider the deeper meaning of it. The opening scene of Batman versus Superman is the ending scene of Man of Steel. It's where Superman is fighting Zod and they destroy the city. It's meant to evoke it's one story, just moving on to the next chapter. At the same time, the opening scene of Zack Snyder's Justice League is the ending scene of Batman versus Superman. It's Superman's death. So again, this next Justice League movie is just the next chapter in the same story. So DC was never going to do it the way that, maybe we wanted, which we were used to with the Marvel movies. They were going to do it their own way, and maybe it would have worked. Maybe it still will work. Like I said, maybe this movie will, get Zack Snyder to come back and continue and finish up the Justice League movies. But again, we won't know. We won't know for a while. Yeah, in the end, I really enjoyed this movie. I was a little bit skeptical going in. Maybe the original theatrical version being a piece of garbage helps this movie look better in comparison, but I still think that this movie is fine on its own. I had just a couple tiny nitpicks, but overall, I really enjoyed this movie. It does not feel like 4 hours. It's a very fast 4 hours, but you can pause it if you need to. There's perfectly timed spots for that. So there it is, my review of Zack Snyder's Justice League. Have you seen it? If so, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and please stay tuned for more.